Hey there, Scott here from Social Energy Presents, and thanks for joining us. We've got another great episode for you to enjoy today featuring Joe Johnson, a highly successful American radio host based in Florida. Joe's been a part of the classic music scene his entire life and is perhaps most recognized as one of the top radio personalities in Miami for nearly 30 years. Joe's conducted personal interviews with a literal who's who of the pop music industry, including iconic artists like Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, Peter Noone, Peter Frampton, Frankie Valli, The Monkees, Brian Wilson, and many, many others. Joe is also a national voiceover artist, a comedian, and is creator of the nationally syndicated Beatle Brunch radio show, where he's heard on nearly 100 radio stations across the country. And today, Joe joins us from his home in Florida for a look back at the successes in his career and to bring us up to speed on what he's been working on next. So sit back, relax, and get ready as Social Energy now presents you with your Backstage Pass.
So where's your office? Is this in your home?
This is one of the bedrooms in my home. You're seeing all the CDs and records, but facing the other way is a studio console and Pro Tools and a mixer and everything. But I just ordered the brand new Pro Tools, and I ordered a digital mixer, but it's so complicated because everything goes to a send, and then you have to send it to the stereo pair, and it's so confusing. So I haven't switched it out yet. And I've been practicing on the new Pro Tools. It's not that different than the current one, or the one that I have. But
yeah, I'm on 12.
Well, this would be like 21 or something like that. I was on
Pro Tools 21.
Well, they're calling it 2021 for the year. I don't know how many versions that would translate to be, but it's like the newest one.
Oh, because I just got mine last year, and it's Pro Tools 12. I didn't upgrade though. I just left it where it was, because when you upgrade Pro Tools, you have to upgrade everything.
Yeah, no, what I did is this one I've had over here for about 16 years, because I only do a couple of stereo and mono tracks and some plugins. I'm not making records over here. So it's always served me well, and it has a great control surface that I love. But this new mixer, you can actually assign, and I actually got lucky, and I don't want to move them. I actually assigned Pro Tools to the mixer faders, because I want to use it as a studio mixer, but they say you can take it like to churches and do all these different mixes. That's not what I want to do. But anyway, so yeah, this is just a bedroom in the house. We have a 4-bedroom house, and this one I took over like 20 years ago and just kind of started doing my thing in here. And then we have a workout room and a guest room and our bedroom. So that's it.
So you do your show out of your home?
Yeah, well, Beatle Brunch is, and it's pre-recorded because it's all mixed, and I put stuff in it and interviews and things and edit and stuff like that. It has to be exactly 48 minutes every, then they add the commercials and they leave 6 minutes for the radio stations to play it. So put their stuff in. So yeah, I do that here. I do voiceovers, I do imaging production, for companies. I'll do voiceovers and produce a spot. I have sound effects and music and that kind of thing. I'm not a musician like you, or I would play my own stuff. Do you have a studio at home?
Yeah, we're sort of sitting in it right now. I'm basically, if you were to see to my left here, I got a kit of drums mic'd up over here, and right over here is an entire wall of guitars.
Wow, and, of course, yeah.
And if there's a drawer right here, and if I pull it out, there's a keyboard in it.
Okay, sure, yeah,
a music keyboard. I mean,
a music keyboard. Gotcha. Yeah, I've my mouse keyboard. Yeah,
and then my rack is to my right here. But so I'm sort of. This is where my studio, which is basically my garage. I got to put into my garage, and it works fine. It does the job for me. The last home I had a garage again, but I'd put up walls and ISO rooms and all that stuff. And I just realized it was just a big waste of time.
Yeah. Well,
especially nowadays.
I normally use this RE20, and they could be mowing the grass right outside. I don't have any soundproofing, and usually you can't hear it if I work it really tight. Plus, I'm pre-recorded, so I just wait for the ice cream man to, leave the block.
Yeah, I've been pretty lucky, and I use an SM7, which is a pretty near-field microphone. I use that most of the time for vocals and things like that. So, you never sing back from those microphones. You're usually right on top of them, and so you don't get a lot of leakage. And if you do, I remember doing this one album. I had, or actually it was a song for an album, and a guy had given me his space, and it was a rehearsal hall with all these rock bands that we rehearse. And he gave me this upstairs room and to convert into a studio. And he says, look, you can have the space for free. I just hope that maybe we can offer service to people who are rehearsing, that they can record with you as well. I went, okay, great. So I set up in there and got the ISO room done and everything else. I was working up there for weeks, and I finally got some vocals. I had to do some vocals on this project, and it was these, and I had these girls come in, and they're singing a very nice, light, like sort of stuff in the backgrounds, really light, operatic, almost, sweet sounding vocals. And right below is this heavy metal band. and there was no isolation whatsoever. So, but I was still able to use it. All I did was I did a roll off at about probably around 200. I did a roll off on the bottom end because it was just the bottom end that was leaking through all the bass drum and the bass guitar. And I was still able to use the vocals. But if I isolate that song, I can still hear all the noise in those vocals, but you don't hear it on the track.
Wow. Let me take my phone out. My phone is running through the computer. So let me actually, I'm just going to turn it off again. Actually, I just saw who it looks like. It was Jason from the cruise. He's like the cruise host when you were on the cruise.
I don't know if I've met him.
Oh, okay. He does a lot of the stage intros, and he does the things, the all access pass,
okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. On the TV and stuff. Yeah, no, he's great. Him and I host a lot of these together. So you rolled off the bottom, and so you ended up using the what you recorded.
Oh, I can still use it. Yeah. It's just, and if I isolate those tracks now and I take the bottom, like take that bypass off, you can hear all that noise in the background, but you don't hear it on the song at all. And this song is all acoustic. I'm playing upright bass on it. You don't hear any of this stuff. But underneath those background vocals is this heavy metal band going crazy.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Cool.
How long have you been doing Beatle Brunch? How many years has it been now?
It's going to be 30 years in about 2 weeks. It started May 31st, 1992. It's yeah.
Because I heard about you years ago. When I was on the road, I would be a lot of times you'd be playing somewhere and you're driving back home on the Sunday morning, especially on Vancouver Island. I would be driving back to catch the ferry to the mainland. Okay. And Beatle Brunch would always come on right at that time on that particular station that you were doing. And it was always the most fascinating show. You always had the best tidbits of stuff, and way before internet. Now you can sort of find these little tidbits here and there.
Yeah, no, it was hard. It was hard. And it had to be 650 Sea Isle. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
I used to be on that station. Yeah, for a long time. With who's the legendary guy that was
Red Robinson?
Red Robinson. He's still with us?
Oh, yes, he is. As a matter of fact, Red is scheduled to be on my show. He's a good friend of mine, actually. Nice. He's a really, really good friend of my partner, in my musical partner. They're very close. But he's, we lost his wife a couple of years ago on my birthday. Sadly, she died of cancer. Oh no. Which is surprising. I mean, she always looked so young and vivacious and stuff. I was surprised that she died at all, or was even sick. But he's been putting together a sort of a bit of a retrospective podcast himself, apparently, where he'll talk about Roy Orbison and all of his dealings he had with Roy Orbison, and then Buddy Holly and all this stuff, and just sort of do them where each show is like 20 minutes. And
that's great. That's great.
Just doing just basically a legacy stuff, which is great. Sure.
Yeah, I think
really, Red is one of the original DJs.
I was going to say every city that the Beatles came to, they always have you have Scott Muni or Cousin Brucey. In Miami, we had a guy named Rick Shaw, who was here on the air for 50 years. I got to be dear friends with him. And Red Robinson. I've actually somewhere I have CDs of his interviews, and it's been a while, but I've played them on Beatle Brunch. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. There was no internet. When I first started, I would record the show to a DAT, but they were $17 each to buy a DAT.
Right.
So I would buy like one, and then I would dub it down to reel-to-reels that the radio station just let me use their stock, and I would mail out the reel-to-reels. Only had like 4 stations. So wow, throughout the country. Yeah, the station I worked for in Miami, which I worked for 30 years, doing all the imaging and commercials and voiceovers and an air shift and everything. I think I sent you that clip of the guy, the Big Bopper and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I did that show for like 15 years, but and I would do Beatle Brunch, and I had to do it at the station. I didn't have reel-to-reels and things here, and Yeah, it was a lot of work, and it was more of I wrote this script and I stuck to it, and then I you remember carts? They look like 8-tracks. I would
Yep.
put the interviews on carts, and as I was talking, I would hit. It was like I was doing a live radio show, so it was hard because if I messed up or somebody came in the room or something, and the noise happened, I usually had to start that whole segment over unless I wanted to edit at the end of it.
And this was still in your house at the time?
No, this was at the radio station.
Okay.
I was the creative services production director, so I ran the studio side and I was on the air, so I could do whatever I want in the studios. And they had nice equipment. We had big analog 8-track with I think it was 2-inch tape.
Right.
So I got to be really good at punching in and out of that, and doing all that analog production, on these reel-to-reels and spinning things and cutting tape and all that. And that's how it was. Even on the request show I had on Saturday night, it was all, I had 2 tape decks, and one I would have something ready to go. Then I would record on the other one. And usually I had to edit for whatever reason, either cut out a story the guy was telling, or they made a mistake, or they asked for a song I couldn't play. They would ask for Stairway to Heaven or something. So I'd have to edit that out or go, hey, what did you want? Hey, and I'd start the call over, and hey, what do you want to hear? So I used their studio, and then it wasn't until I moved to this house in 1998 that maybe a year or so later, I built this studio. It's just I ordered a rack size console for equipment because I was thinking I'm going to do a live show from here. So I have 3 CD players. I have a DVD CD recorder and a DAT player, which never worked. I have a mini disc. I have a cassette. I have processing. I have a double CD dubber. I had stuff that was more analog friendly, but now everything is completely online. You're right. It's so if I wanted to say what cars did the Beatles drive, I could type it in and I could have the answer for you, in like a minute.
Yeah. Back then it was I remember listening to your show going, where does he get this stuff? Because it was way before the anthologies and all that stuff where that stuff was just, you couldn't find it anywhere.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm going to have to think back to that because 1992, the anthology didn't come out till 94. And in fact, in my studio wall is a picture of me sitting at Abbey Road Studios on the steps. And somebody took a picture of me. And at the same time we were there, there was a Rolls Royce parked in front of the Abbey Road steps. Have you ever been to Abbey Road Studio?
Yes.
It's pretty amazing to be there. Sorry, I have to cough here. Anyway, there was this Rolls Royce in front of it, and we were all looking in thinking, oh, George Martin must be here. And on the back seat, there were these brochures that said the Beatles anthology, like folders and things. And I took a picture of it, which I have still back when, cameras weren't digital. You had to get the film developed. So you're walking around going, I got 4 pictures left. What do I really want to take? Back in the day, remember you had to manage your photos. I only have 3 left. Take another picture of me. No, I got you already. So I took a picture of that because it was really cool. I didn't know if it was his car or not. And then when I got the film developed, there was a reflection on the window of a guy standing next to me wearing a John Lennon shirt. And John's got this pose like this. So he looks like a ghost.
Oh, wow.
And then in the back seat is the Beatles anthology stuff.
Wow.
So, and I didn't know that was going to happen until I got home, but that Rolls Royce, we all went out and were signing the wall and not paying attention. All of a sudden it pulls out and George Martin is driving. And he was with some other guy, like a producer. I posted the picture one time and this guy in London goes, oh, that's such and such. He was the editor or whatever. So yeah, that's exactly what they were doing. In fact, we went into the studio. Hey, is George Martin here? And of course they said, no, no, he's not here. He's not here. He's got his own studio. So I took these tape box covers they had, if you send out 5-inch reel tapes, they have a little cover. You could write what spots are on there or whatever. I took a few home. And then when I got, I forget where I was, I ended up mailing them to his secretary who I met, and he signed them for me. So I have them on a frame thing. And let's see, it's the picture of the Beatles anthology where they're standing on the steps. And then above it is a picture of me taking the exact same pose, sitting on the steps. So,
oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And then there's a picture of George Martin driving the Rolls Royce out. I'm looking at it right now. So, and then it's his signature on the tape box. It's just a weird thing I had framed when I got home. But, when I interviewed him when they did the Love Cirque du Soleil, when that started out, and it was him and Giles, I think I was more nervous interviewing George Martin because I'm a production person and I've listened to all his stuff in headphones and I can tell you where all the mistakes are and where the edits are and, on the songs. And so, yeah. And I interviewed him and Giles right at the beginning of the Love Cirque du Soleil show in Vegas. So it was 2006. And he was sweet. We talked for like 10 minutes. I posted the interview on my Facebook page or website. And I saw him at this after party that night. And it was in the little room they had at the Mirage. And he came up to me and he goes, "How did you like the show? What did you think of the show?" I said, "Oh, I thought it was beautiful." He goes, "Oh, I was worried." And I'm thinking, I hardly believe he was worried, but it was so sweet of him, He was
he always struck me as such a nice gentleman.
Yeah, that's how I felt. I felt that he was just really genuine and listening to what I was saying and giving honest answers. And, being one of these people probably like you that listens to everything and hears edits and everything. There's when Paul does "If I Fell" and he sings the word "in vain."
Yeah, the crack.
The second time he sings it, the stereo version, his voice cracks. And I know what they did when they made the mono. They just flew in the other take of him saying "vain" because you can kind of hear it over the other one, over the stereo one. So in mono, his voice doesn't crack, but on the stereo, they didn't spend a lot.
Really? See, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so
I didn't know that one.
So I said to George Martin, I figured, well, he'll definitely know about that. I said, when you were recording "If I Fell" with Paul McCartney, and the second time he sings the line "in vain," his voice cracks, and then you guys covered it up with that. He goes, "I don't have any idea what you're talking about. I don't remember that at all." So, they were just cutting these songs and getting out of there. One of my favorite books. My favorite books is this Mark Lewis and Studio Sessions, this white book. You probably have it. Yeah. You can go to any date in Beatle history. That's probably where I got a lot of information. Like if I went to "If I Fell," it was recorded, March 3rd, or whatever date, for A Hard Day's Night, and pick out some information. Maybe they would tell you where the edit is, or, they did 14 takes of the song that day. So, I mean, that's one of the books that if I had to run out of my studio and only grab like one or two books, that would definitely be the one, even though I can order it on Amazon. That book, and probably the Jeff Emmerich book too, because I love
the Jeff Emmerich book.
Yeah, he was there.
He seemed a little hard on George for my liking, though.
Yeah, he was, and I did an interview with him. You've probably never been to Abbey Road on the River. It's right over the Ohio River in Jeffersonville, Indiana, and it's right near St. Louis. And he was the guest there, and I got to do like 2 days of interviews with him, and for like. These were like Jeff nuts, so the interview was like 2.5 hours, and right. We had only gotten up to like Rain, we still hadn't done the White Album or anything. So he was great. And we were talking about the Love Cirque du Soleil, and we were talking about the mashups and the mix-ups and the remixing and the going back and putting out different versions of the anthology and that kind of thing. And he said to me, I said, "What did you think? You must have been freaked out when these came out." He goes, "I refused to listen to them." I said, "What?" He goes, "Nope. I listened to the mono Sgt. Pepper or the mono mix of the album that we did. And that's, to me, that's the final version. I don't want to hear other."
John Lennon said the same thing about Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah.
He said, he said, if you want to hear Sgt. Pepper the way it was meant to be, you listen to the mono version. The stereo version doesn't give it, because it's true. There's segues that are wrong. Even
right. That's and they also there's, I'll tell you what's the song. Oh, the mono, and this is weird that it's on the mono version. The mono version of Obla Di Obla Da doesn't have the hand claps. It's interesting until you know that. It might have been an overdub thing, and maybe they were just too lazy to do it, and they put the song out, and then maybe they realized it at that time, because the stereo one has the hand claps in stereo. So I don't know why they did that.
I always remember, because my brother, I think he actually borrowed it at the time. I had the mono version of Sgt. Pepper when it first came out, and I was a little kid. I remember crying because the Beatles changed their name. I was like, "Why did they change their name to Sgt. Pepper's? That's a silly name." I didn't understand that was the name of the album at the time, but I did love that album. I played it incessantly. But there was that segue between Good Morning into the reprise, where it goes,
that little
it's got the chicken goes buck, 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 and the guitar answers it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but
brilliant.
When it doesn't do that, it misses a beat, and it drove me crazy.
On the mono, so your mono album, but I don't even know if I have the mono album. I definitely have the mono CD because it came in the box set.
Well, it's the same thing, yeah.
I'm sure they fixed it though by then. That was the thing that we.
No. I'm saying the mono one was the right way. It was
it was
the
a stereo that has space.
It missed a beat. So the mono one, it's like the chicken went right into the guitar lick. It went buck, 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 bah.
Yep.
And it answers it. And on the stereo one, it misses a beat, so it just sounds awkward. It just sounds like an awkward moment.
That's crazy. I wonder if that's because the album that I have in my catalog, not the one that I bought recently, but the one that I have from being a kid, probably has the same thing. I don't even have a turntable hooked up anymore, but I should probably go play it and see if it does it on this one. It's a stereo and it's probably 40 years old, or I probably bought it in early 80s or something.
Yeah, I remember the segue between Sgt. Pepper and Little Help was different too.
That seemed like it was more like a blend because the crowd comes up and stuff. But yeah, the stuff that I always looked for, they said that crowd that comes up, that's from the Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, they just kind of faded that in of the crowd, but
because the rest of the crowd was from the Goonies, wasn't it?
Oh, where there is something
like the opening, like the people chuckling at the end of With You or Without You. I think that was from the Goonies because
I think you're right. Yeah, there's they go bum 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 bum.
Yeah.
That kind. I think he took some of that. I think George Martin. That was one of the things that got me to do the show. I watched The Making of Sgt. Pepper. It came out in 1992, and it was on the Disney Channel for some reason. Nowadays, it would be somewhere on Netflix or Apple Plus, I guess, or whatever. But that to me, and then they put it out on the Sgt. Pepper box set in 2017. That was, to me, was the earliest version of the anthology because he was in the hallway. He was in Abbey Road Studios, George Martin, and that was the first time he potted up just the vocal, and you could hear Ringo singing here. I was like blown away. It was like that was a life-changing moment for me with Beatles, and seeing him, George Martin. I'm pointing to him because he's looking at me. Seeing him do that was crazy, and I had been there. Remember, I was. That's what they were working on. Like maybe they were working on when I saw him. The Making of Sgt. Pepper, but it did have the anthology papers on the back seat. I'll send you a copy.
Well, I'm sure it would have taken a long time for that to put together, so it's quite possible.
And I remember going over there a year or two before, and I called up, there was no internet, like you mentioned, so I got the number and I called, and I said, I'm a broadcaster in America. I do a Beatles show. Can I come over and get a tour of Abbey Road? And they gave me a tour, and I remember trying to go down the hallway, and those old, I didn't realize what they were. Those old 4-track tape machines were in the hallway, and you had to turn sideways to get by. Wow. And they were like, oh, those are the old tape decks from, I think George Martin was using them or something. It's so weird that I didn't realize it.
That's what they were doing. They were transferring those old tapes. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I wish I would have known more to take a picture, but again, I didn't have a digital camera or phone or anything. Maybe I didn't even I must have brought my camera. I think I took pictures outside. And
I have the stems to a lot of Beatles songs that I've been collecting over the years.
Was that from the Rock Band CDs?
I don't know where they came from. I'm assuming they might have.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Do you know who Jim Valance is?
The name is familiar. Yeah.
Jim Valance, he's like a mega songwriter. He rose to fame basically as Bryan Adams' songwriting partner, but now he's co-written with he's done songs with Aerosmith and Ozzy Osbourne and you name it. His pedigree is amazing. Anyway, we're old friends, and he's a Beatle freak like you and I. Crazy. Like we constantly exchange stuff back and forth. Like he says, "Have you heard this? It's George playing saxophone on All You Need Is Love," and he sends it to me, and you can hear George on this saxophone going,
Oh, that's awesome.
Sax part, but it's actually in the mix, but he was able to get it isolated.
Wow, I love that. I have to. I don't know if it's a hassle for you, but the cities that don't air Beatle Brunch, I have the Beatle Brunch Club, and members can go in and listen to the show. It's commercial free. In fact, there's more content on the show than there is on the air because I'm limited to 48 minutes, and sometimes the track goes long, and I use it for the club. So I'll definitely make a membership for you, and if it's not a hassle, and if you can, I can show you how to put the little app on your phone so you can play it through the car. You can do whatever you want.
Oh, great. Well, there's something else I was going to tell you though. Jim wrote me. Right. He wrote me about 4 weeks ago. I'm thinking 4 or 5 weeks ago, and he says, "Have you heard this?" Because I'd shared the stems with Abbey Road, and you're hearing the piano track. Once there was a way to get back home. Where that part, you're hearing the piano track, and you know what you're hearing in the background?
No. Oh, is it the
There's a
metronome?
click. There's some sort of a click on there. And we're both going, why is there a click on this?
You don't think
it doesn't make sense. The Beatles never used a click.
Right.
Why is there a click on that track? And there's a click on that track. And it's way in the background, but it's no doubt there's a click there. Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out if maybe McCartney recorded that piano separately, and then with a little metronome going with it, and then he used that, and Ringo overdubbed his, the Golden Slumbers drum parts,
Yeah.
But it's that's an anomaly I wasn't aware of at all. You get these little things. That's the thing about Beatle freaks. Michael Sicoli, a good friend of mine, he's the one I was talking about that's really good friends with Red Robinson. He's always talking, because we were friends in high school, and we talk the same way now as we did then. We're always finding tidbits of stuff. Hey, did you see this? Hey, you know when John's playing this chord, he's actually playing this chord. And I was on YouTube the other day. I can't believe it. I've been playing it wrong all these years. It's this. It's an F7 or it's an F6. It's not a D minor. Or this sort of the weirdest little things. And they're all so important to people like us,
They are. When I do these, I used to do Beatle Fests or Abbey Road on the River, and they always have like symposiums in a room, and there's people that talk about that stuff. There are people that they do a presentation on it, and they play the example. Have you ever seen Scott Fryman do Deconstructing the Beatles? Because he was
I went to one of his presentations in Vancouver.
It's incredible, right? I mean, it's what he's allowed to do. He has to run all this stuff by these lawyers, the length of the song that he can do. And it's because it's considered educational.
Right.
So he's able to do it, but it's just incredible what he does. And he pulls out all these tapes and things and click track type of stuff, that
I learned a lot that day, the Lady Madonna piano thing. And he was talking about, what's the name of that song?
By Fats Domino?
No, it's not Fats Domino.
Bad Penny Blues?
English version of that kind of guy. And McCartney says, I love the sound of that piano. He found out it was actually done at Abbey Road at this piano. He says, well, I want it mic'd up exactly the same. When you hear that intro and you hear Lady Madonna, you go, it's a direct rip. It's like the feel.
There's a band you may know. They're called the Weaklings. Do you know the Weaklings? Glenn Burtonette.
I know the name.
He was in Styx. He wasn't an original, but he was in Styx for like 15 years. And he plays in the orchestra, which is that 70s. I don't know if they were on the cruise when you were, but they do all the Electric Light Orchestra stuff. Glenn Burtnick. He and I talked to him yesterday, actually. What was I going to say about what were we talking about?
We're talking about the Lady Madonna.
The Lady Madonna. He calls me up one day, or he sends me a text. He goes, Joe, I'm at Abbey Road Studios, and I'm right in front of the piano where they did Lady Madonna. He goes, you want me to send you a voice memo of something? I said, yeah. Don't just tell me. I want you to walk up the stairs, do a narration, and then play something on the piano. And he did. And he played Lady Madonna, and I've got it. And I played it on the show, and then I blended it into the Pro Tools, into the song,
Oh, great.
So, yeah, he was just going to do like a little report for me. I said, no, man, play something.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
We're recording our second album, and we're thrilled to be here. An amazing thing is when you're done with your take, you go running up the stairs into the control room, and you want to hear the playback of what you just did. And basically, as I walk on those stairs, I think about how many times John, Paul, George, and Ringo did the very same thing.
This is supposedly the piano that this song was recorded on.
So I don't know if he would have gotten in trouble. I don't know if you're not supposed to play the instruments, but it's still there. And
I wonder if that's the famous Mrs. Mills piano.
I believe it must be, because McCartney's talked about that piano a lot.
Yeah, I got the feeling that's the one. It's an old upright I think they called. Was it Mrs. Mills had a radio show from there or something?
I think so. He's talked about her before, and maybe even on the Making of Sgt. Pepper, McCartney talks about the Mrs. Mills thing. I think so. And they always talked about all the different people they would run into that were doing, classical pieces or narrating plays and different things that were happening at Abbey Road Studios. We used to do this I used to be part of this trip to London, Liverpool with Charles Rosenet. He does all these trips. He's been doing them for like 40 years. And I guess what he does, this is his workaround. I guess he books an hour at Studio 2. He does it a year in advance, and it's from, 1 to 2 p.m. And so he brings all the people on the tour. There's maybe 30 of us. And you're in, I've got pictures. I've actually got this little DV video. I don't even know how to extract it anymore. I can send it away to this company, of us at Abbey Road Studios, walking around and going up the staircase. And when you go into the control room, obviously it's all new, digital updated equipment, but you can surely recognize that staircase that comes down and, the sound baffles. And I did an interview with, and you may know them, with the Zombies, Colin Blunstone and
I've never met them. I'd love to talk to them.
You guys would talk Beatles for hours, because I did an interview with them, and even backstage before we went out on the last cruise I did, they're such Beatle geeks. And they were saying that they did their album Odyssey and Oracle like the day after the Beatles finished Sgt. Pepper. They were booked like next. And Rod Argent, he's the other principal songwriter. Right. He's the song. He goes, we go in there and there's all these pieces of paper with lyrics on them and everything. I said, what are you, crazy? There's stuff in those in my, can you imagine like today? But
you could buy a neighborhood with that.
You could. There's actually a story I read or heard that Paul McCartney found out the guy that had the handwritten lyrics to Yesterday. I guess he was telling people he had it, and he must have stolen it or taken it from somewhere, or maybe he worked at Abbey Road. Paul contacted him and said, I got to have that. You got to give that to me. It belongs to me. You took it from me. So they worked out some kind of trade. I think Paul wrote the lyrics for him personally again, or something like that, and signed it. But yeah, McCartney wanted to have that back. I think he's one of the biggest Beatle collectors. The Bee Gees, who there's only one left, they live here in South Florida. Somebody told me that they bought some original consoles that they recorded music on, but I mean, that may not be the case, because we were just talking about the the 4-track recorders, but maybe that's not the console, the 4-track recorders being in the hallway and that kind of thing.
Well, I'd heard that Lenny Kravitz owned the board from Abbey Road, that he recorded a lot of his stuff was done on the old 4-track and the 4-track tape. Like when he was doing back in his heyday, he was actually recording with that sort of stuff. I don't know if that was folklore or what, but because he was sort of known as a retro kind of act, Right.
Well, I think that probably was a lot of equipment to go around, and there was a time where people didn't care about that stuff. Oh, that's an old tape. Get that out of here,
Well, same as the lyrics left lying around.
Yeah, exactly. John's like
millions of dollars to Sotheby's now.
Yeah, and it's been a long time since I've been to London, but you go to the London Museum, and McCartney's even talked about this on interviews since I've been there. Here's the Rosetta Stone, and then you walk over here. Here's a glass case. The lyrics to "In My Life," Penny Lane, Strawberry handwritten. You can tell they're the original. And again, I took pictures of them, so there's a little bit of a reflection. But I have a picture where you can see the lyrics to "In My Life," and he scratched out a whole paragraph of lyrics that I guess he was going to sing, a whole break of
well, that was part of the lithographs collection that Lennon had. Yoko had put out years ago, and I actually had a few of them. I had them in the living in my last house. Unfortunately, the house that we moved into has very little wall space, so I ended up giving them to a friend of ours who has her whole basement. Her and her husband is devoted to the Beatles. So I said, if anybody deserves to have this in their house, it's you. So I've got one. It's a piece of art, John Lennon's self-portrait in the center, and there's 5 of Beatles handwritten lithographs, and then the other one is his self-portrait again, and 5 of his solo stuff.
Oh wow, okay, yeah.
But it was interesting because one of the ones was revolution, and you could see all the shun words he had at the bottom, words that ended in th.
Oh sure, yeah, to deduction.
And he wrote them all at the bottom of the paper, and he was putting them up into the verses, making them work.
That's awesome.
It was like nobody would probably think to just go get a rhyming dictionary or something. They didn't have them in those days, I'm sure.
I just read, it was literally like 2 days ago, that a similar story. You've seen the Imagine film, I think, that the guy knocks on the door and he wants to know, were you writing those songs for me? And I know, and John, and I just read that whole exchange. I forget where it was the other day, where Lennon said, no, those words, we were just trying to rhyme. We were just looking for rhymes to this rhymed with that. And Yoko came up with that word, and that has nothing to do with you, But you said the same thing, because in that text of what he was transcribing, what was transcribed, I saw it on social media, maybe. It was shun, revolution, and deduction, and contraption, and there was a whole bunch of words he didn't use. There was disillusion. Disillusion. There was a whole ton of them. Like just a lot of words he didn't use, but he had them all. He wrote them all out first. You can tell it was done first, and then putting them up into the verses to make them work. So you must, when you are recording with Randy Bachman, I know that he does that whole Hard Day's Night opening chord, right? He's done. Yeah,
we did that oh God. I'm a bad Canadian for not remembering this.
You're on that. You're part of
the theater. It's a CBC theater in Toronto. Yeah, we did that years ago. I think 2010. Oh gosh, yeah,
it's been around a long time. Yeah, it's 2010. Yeah. YouTube. So you're playing on that, because I don't remember if it's just him on the guitar. Yeah, no, it's everybody in the band actually, except for Tal. Tal's in the band now, but that was before Tal joined. So, and I know, I mean, I have By George, and I know that he's obviously a George fan. So do you guys talk Beatles a lot, or do you work Beatles? Yeah. Play Randy. Beatles in your sound check and things like that?
Randy's a Beatle freak. Well, when Randy comes out for sound check, sometimes he, if he's busy doing interviews and stuff like that, we'll handle the sound check. Usually if it's a major production where there's something that he should be there, he's there. Sure. But if it's other things where we can sort of do his guitar and his monitors for him, it's not
to
a big
get the
deal.
Sound and the volume.
Yeah, we know what we want. We've been with him long enough. We know what he needs, so we can cover for him. But anyway, getting back to your question, we talk and play Beatles all the time. All the time.
I was going to say
that album was actually done in my studio.
This the By George album.
Yeah. All the tablas. I played the tablas. I played the sitars on it. A lot of the guitars, I used a thing that you may know what it is. Some people don't. A Nashville tuning, which is basically I have a guitar that has all the high strings of a 12-string on a 6-string guitar.
Okay, wow. Okay.
Really different inversions on it, so it gives you little tinkles and stuff. So that was done. The slide guitar for because we did a slide. I can't remember the album right now. It's bad. We did where we would take slide parts from one song but put them into another song, and but anyway, no, those were done at my place. There was a lot of stuff that was done at my place, a ton. Wow. What would happen is Randy at the time was still living in Toronto. He hadn't moved back to Vancouver Island yet, and I was still living on the mainland. And so he would send an MP3 of his song that was done to grid, so it was in time, and I would load that in, and then Mark and Brent would come to my place, and we would play what we felt the song needed underneath, and play all that stuff. So Mark would play on my drums. We ended up redoing the drums in the studio, but Mark would play my drums, and we put those in just to load it up so we knew what we were doing when we went into the studio.
Right.
A lot of the stuff that was done, like background vocals and things like that, were all out of my studio, and we just flew them in at the studio when we got there because they were good enough to use. So
that sounds great. There's another musician you might know, Andy. What's his name? He wrote a book called Beatles Gear, and he's actually friends with Little Steven. And he wrote a book called Beatles Gear. And when I was,
is he the guy that has the Beatles Gear website?
Oh, sure, I'm sure he does. Yeah,
because there's one that's just unbelievable.
Yeah, so the book is unbelievable too, because he got Yoko gave him permission to come to the Dakota and photograph all of John's guitars.
Oh, really? Ooh.
And then what he did is he met Ringo, and Ringo had all his drums in like a warehouse, but they were just a mess everywhere. And he told Ringo, he says, would it be okay if I put them back together for you? Because Ringo had no idea. And I think when you're Ringo, you just throw them in a corner or whatever. So he reassembled from photographs his Washington, D.C. kit, Ed Sullivan, and reassembled them for Ringo. And Ringo must have been freaked out. And then he took pictures for his book,
Wow.
So
no, this is way different than what I was thinking. This guy sounds like
but you would like his book because you were talking about, you have your guitars hanging up and that kind of thing. The book came out in like an 2006 or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I think you and I have a different appreciation of the Beatles that's deeper, and you're a musician. So you're hearing things that I don't even know exist. And that's the fun thing about getting with Beatle nerds. You start talking about edits and, like you were talking about the click track and all those little things,
Well, it's interesting. I've often thought, this is a really weird thought, but this is how my brain operates sometimes, is that I actually feel sorry for the Beatles. Why? Because everybody I know in the music world, I can talk like this, like the way I am with you. Yeah. I can talk for hours about them, and they can't do that. Well, they can do it in a special way, but only amongst the two of them now. Right. But they don't have the perspective of the rest of the world on them.
Sure.
We can talk about this stuff forever, and it's in great joy. Like I can talk for days about this stuff.
Well, in the anthology, they disagree a lot, and I'm sure you remember where they go, "Oh yeah, we only played Shea Stadium once, one time." Well, over to you, Paul. You would know, and that kind of thing. And they did play it twice because I had a ticket to '66, which I sold on eBay a couple of months ago. So so they've always said it was the eye of the hurricane, and they said we never. That's, I think, one of them kind of used your premise. He said we never got to see the Beatles live. And watching it on a tape a day later or something, it's not the same thing.
Exactly.
But so they don't remember things as much. And one of the things, and I try not to talk about it too much because I wouldn't want it to get back to Paul, but for 40 years, he's been saying, or 50, 60 years, we decided we weren't going to come to America until we had a number one, because all these other bands had come and failed and they had to go home with their tail between their legs. And we said, we're not going to America until we had a number one. So we got a Hold Your Hand went to number one in America. 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, we came in and the song was number one, and, it was timing. But that's totally, because we have the books, we have the studio, Mark Lewis in the studio session book. They recorded I Want to Hold Your Hand on October 17th, 1963. Then they went to Sweden and they did a tour. They came back to Sweden and maybe they mixed the record or whatever. And when Ed Sullivan saw them coming back from Sweden, and this was maybe 10 days after they did I Want to Hold Your Hand, song wasn't even out yet. And so they signed with Ed Sullivan. He met with Brian Epstein a couple of weeks later, and they signed the deal in November. The song wasn't released till the end of December. So
a lot of gray area there. Yeah, good
It's
point.
impossible that it could have been number one or that they planned it, because they had already had songs that were equally as good, from the Please Please Me album.
Well, and the interesting thing is that famously, I think Brian Epstein made a deal with Ed Sullivan where they got the Beatles for free,
pretty much,
as long as they opened and closed the show.
Right. Yeah. Well, they always tell the story that I actually have a recording from Ed Sullivan. They were paid $10,000 to do all three Ed Sullivan shows because they taped the third one.
Oh, they did make money then.
Well, they were paid $10,000, and that was airfare for the four Beatles and Brian Epstein. So they had to add a pocket probably for the rest of the, if they wanted to bring Cynthia and these other people and these other reporters or whoever. And then they stayed at the Deauville Hotel here in Miami, which recently got torn down, which is a sad situation. And they stayed in New York. Yeah, I mean, the $10,000, I mean, how much could they have gotten? A couple $100 a piece or something by the time they,
I was talking to Felix Cavalieri. He was on the show. And it was interesting because it's stated that the Rascals opened up for the Beatles at Shea Stadium. And I went, that's weird. So I brought it up to him. He goes, no. He says, that's whoever reported that is wrong. What it was, Sid Bernstein, who had brought the Beatles into America, was the Rascals manager.
Right.
So what he had at Shea Stadium was up on the big scoreboard was a sign that said the Rascals are coming, flashing on before the Shea Stadium show.
Wow.
And Brian Epstein walked up to Sid Bernstein and said, either that goes or the Beatles aren't playing.
Wow. So they didn't play on that tour, because I think I have a CD I'm gonna have to look. I've never listened to that part of it. It's like the whole Shea raw of everything. So that maybe you don't think they played a couple of hours before or something? Probably. I mean,
he claims they didn't play at all.
Yeah,
he said they sat in the bleachers and watched the show.
Felix would know because he's really tight on his facts, because
and he also he informed me how the Ed Sullivan Show worked. I didn't realize this. He said, yeah, it's a week-long process. He said, and you get a stage call at 7:00 Monday morning. And you go in and you block your place and everything's rehearsed, and then they would do the entire show on Saturday in front of a live audience that wasn't taped. Right. And then on Sunday they would do the live one that went to the broadcast. But it's like I always thought it was like, maybe they'd come in on Friday, but it was a week-long process. But when you think about it, I'm thinking, like, what am I thinking? Of course, he's got plate spinners and animal shows and all that stuff. Of course, it's going to take a week to put that together.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they came in on the 7th and the show was on the 9th, so they didn't have a lot of lead time. But what they did do that I always point out, or I have pointed out on the show, is the third show, which was February 23rd. It was also from New York. It was, I think it was 6 songs, 3 and 3. They recorded that before. They recorded that the afternoon of the Sunday Ed Sullivan Show. So the 23rd is really their first Ed Sullivan Show. But they saved it for 2 weeks because the following week they went to Miami.
Say that again. I didn't.
Okay. So they did February 9th. They did an Ed Sullivan Show from New York. February 16th, they did one from where I live in Miami. And then February 23rd, another show from New York. Well, they were already back home on the 20th. They taped the 23rd show on February 9th, the morning. So the show that you're talking about that they would have done, because in Miami they did an afternoon show that was not broadcast, and there's bootlegs of it. They're wearing like their beach clothes and stuff like that you may have seen them, different clothes than they wore at night. They did like a rehearsal, full run through Sunday afternoon in Miami. So instead of, I guess maybe in the New York one, they went ahead and did the show for the 23rd.
Wow, that's interesting. Another thing that Felix said too, he said, is Ed Sullivan was very good with his pay structure. He said musicians got paid full, like you would get paid as if it was a full concert for one song.
Wow, that's fantastic.
He said because he had a huge budget given to him from CBS and stuff, and he wanted to make sure that everybody was paid properly for their craft. Which he said he was a really good guy that way.
Was the Ed Sullivan Show available to you in Canada?
Oh yeah. Well, it wasn't broadcast in Canada. How it was is back in the days. I'm from Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. Across from Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. So we had CBC television in Sault Ste. Marie, rabbit ears on the TV. Right. And if you put tinfoil on the rabbit ears and pointed them just the right way,
get Detroit.
You could get Channel 10 in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, which had CBS, and we could watch the Ed Sullivan Show and Bonanza and The Wonderful World of Disney.
Wow.
Or actually, it was Wonderful World of Disney, Ed Sullivan, and Bonanza in that row. That's the way it worked on CBS that night.
I remember Sunday night was Bonanza. My parents watched that. I was 6 when they were on Ed Sullivan, so I have a memory of it, but more like, my parents said, felt like they had to watch it. So it was on, but I don't remember I'm going to go get a guitar the next day. Like a lot of guys do, I was your age. I was your age at the same time. So I remember when the Beatles came on, I remember my parents not liking them, but my brothers and sisters liking them because they were older. And of course I sided with my parents, but by the time the Miami show happened, I was sold. And from then on in, I was a total Beatle freak. Right from that age, I was just engrossed in anything Beatles. What were you? Well, you were too young then to really have other musical interests. Did you? Well, you played guitar and you started learning instruments as a young kid. So what else were you listening to? Because before the Beatles, it was like Bobby V and
I didn't listen to anything. I do remember I remember my brother bringing home Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini, and that was way before that.
That was 63. That song.
Was it? Okay, so that would have been a year before.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're actually the perfect guy to ask this stuff. You would have a walking knowledge of all that. My brother Dennis bought that single, and I remember playing that. So we must have played that just before we moved into our new house. Okay, got it. I'm sorting out things. I'm sorting out things in my head. And so, and the Beatles was February 9th, 1964. So we just moved into our new house. Wow. Incredible. No, wait a minute. Hold on. There's something wrong with that. So he was 63 with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can look it up, but I played it on the radio a million times.
Yeah, but it's not like 62.
Let me just get the Joel Whitburn book.
Just for my own self-interest.
Brian Hyland, Itsy Bitsy. Oh, well, God, you got me beat. It was 1960.
Ah, there we go.
Yeah, see, look at that. I'm not the one to ask about that.
Okay, so that's because I know it was way before the Beatles because I was a toddler, but I remember hearing it. I remember singing along with that song. And just when I was a little guy, I would have been like 3 or 4.
Yeah, I'm trying to think that I always remember the first song I remember hearing on the radio that was pop music was "Take Good Care of My Baby," Bobby V. So that was like 62 maybe. So yeah. I was like maybe 4 or something. I just remember it being a kid not in school yet and being home with my mom and she's cooking or whatever and just hearing that on the radio. And then I remember All My Lovin', even though it wasn't a single. I remember hearing that on the radio, but I didn't know anything about it. You know, that was 63. I don't think they played it on the radio in America until 64.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't have.
They opened with it on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Yeah, and really smart that they did. There were bells on the hill.
Till There Was You, yeah.
Till There Was You, the second song. What a great way to get the parents on their side. Yep. Holy crap. Like, who are these long-haired freaks? And all of a sudden they break into, the sound of music.
And Paul's looking, he's doing this.
I know. It was brilliant because
they were doing that song. They had been doing that. If you go to the BBC material and you see some of the stuff they did in 62 for television over there, they were doing Till There Was You.
Well, that's what they wanted to be, those type of songwriters. They were hoping to be like a Rodgers and Hammerstein, Yeah.
Well, they had, mainly Paul, had those, like When I'm 64 and the stuff from the White Album, Martha, My Dear, and those old ragtime sounding tunes.
Well, I'll Follow the Sun. He wrote at a very young age too. That was one of his first.
I have a Star Club CD. So that was 1960. And you can hear them doing I'll Follow the Sun on that.
Get out of here. Really?
Yeah. It's one of the old Star Clubs. Yeah. So, the quality is horrible. Somebody was like sitting at a table way in the back, but you can clearly pick out them and they do the banter, and that kind of thing. It's kind of neat.
John Lennon with the toilet seat around his head.
I think it might've been that time period, but Brian Epstein made them get rid of all that stuff. That was, I don't know how that would have played over here, but
no kidding.
But I want to run this by you because you probably know the song. And it was a number one hit, I think April or May of 64. Lauren Green, speaking of Bonanza,
Ringo
had a song called Ringo.
Yeah.
Now, number one or not was based on sale position, not radio play necessarily. So you're a 15-year-old kid, a 12-year-old kid. You're looking for Beatle albums, Beatle songs, and the thing, and you come across one called Ringo. By law, you have to buy it.
Yeah.
If you're a Beatle fan, you don't know what's on there. There's no way to play it. I mean, I think you could do that in Brian Epstein's record shop, but I don't think in here.
They certainly capitalized on that because the song had nothing to do with Ringo's song.
No, it's an old gunslinger named Ringo. Sometimes I play a loop of that in the show just to point out that that was out at the same time.
Yeah, no, But that it's amazing that whole Beatle thing has just infected so many of us over these years. And it's weird because I can divide myself from the Beatles, the members of the Beatles and the Beatles era and the members of the Beatles post-Beatles.
Sure.
Like I sort of think of Paul as a different guy now somehow.
Right.
Like, I don't know what it is, some sort of psychological thing. I would still be absolutely in awe of him, like what do I say to a guy like that? I was in proximity to him once. You've actually interviewed him.
I've interviewed him on the phone a few times, but then I got to go to Tampa to interview him, and it almost didn't happen. I almost blew it, but it was like 22 minutes or something. I've got it posted online. And he was really sweet. He came in and he said my name and he said, "Oh, you do a show called," they obviously briefed him, you do a show called Beatle Brunch and that kind of thing. And he was great. And his publicist had told me right before, don't talk about the Beatles. Don't talk about Linda. Don't talk about Heather. Don't talk about his kids. Only talk about the tour and the new album, which was Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. It was 2005, I think. And so, but it doesn't matter with Paul because I had just seen him in Miami. And one of the first questions I had for him, or comment, I said, I just saw you in Miami at the Miami Arena, and you did your show was 2.5 hours. And, how do you sing that long? Well, in the Beatle days, we didn't like you. We'd only do 27 minutes. So you don't have to talk about the Beatles. He'll be happy to talk about the Beatles. And he even told me that story about the movement you need is on your shoulder, that was like a filler line. When he ran it by John, he said, I'll be changing that. And John says, you won't, that's the best line in the song. I know what it means.
Yeah.
So he told, and I had heard the story a bunch of times, but he's telling me the story. Here's the guy that wrote Hey Jude telling me how he wrote Hey Jude. I mean, how surreal is this?
Yeah, it's so cool. I was back in 2005. He was on tour, and we had a gig with my band, not with Randy, but my band that backs up Randy now. But we had a gig to open up there was a hockey strike. So a friend of ours was the vice president of the Maple Leafs in Toronto, and he hired us to do 2 shows outside because they're having a big celebration that hockey is back. And he hired us. And part of the contract was we got to go see Paul. Well, then I'm talking to a friend of mine who's actually a professor, and he professor of psychology at SFU at the time. And he said, my pipe and I'm actually playing at Paul's show. He says, I've been asked to play drums at that. I said, what? He says, yeah. He says, well, the only time he does Mull of Kintyre is in Canada, because Canada has a great pipe and drum corps, and it went #1 here. Okay. So I've been asked to play. So anyway, it turns out, he said, which hotel are you staying at? I'll make sure I check into the same hotel. So he checks into my hotel. So the day of the show, I said, well, let me go down there and I'll just hang out with you outside before you go in. Yeah. So I go down and I find out that the drummers think I'm a piper and the pipers think I'm a drummer. They don't know each other. They're all I thought they knew each other. They were all under contract. They didn't know each other at all. They were just reading the music. So all of a sudden this guy comes, okay, in you go. And now all of a sudden I'm in Paul McCartney's sound check, and I'm not supposed to be there at all. That's awesome. Right. Yeah. So, and it's crazy. There was bomb sniffing dogs, all that stuff. And I mean, that was shortly after 9/11, Right. So it was crazy. So all of a sudden I'm up on the top and I'm looking down, and there's Paul McCartney's stage. And then now they have to go down to rehearse with Paul. I'm going, what the hell am I going to do? So now it ends up looking, they thought that I was the manager of the pipe and drum corps somehow. So now they're coming up and they start asking me questions about stuff. And luckily I knew the answers. At that particular tour, I think it was Lexus was underwriting the tour. I remember the Lexus tour. Yeah, they had a car parked out front. I read about it in Rolling Stone magazine. It was just a thing I happened to read. So here I am. I'm sitting and I'm recording my friend rehearsing Mull of Kintyre with Paul. And I'm thinking, like totally illegal. They didn't want me to do that. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. Somebody walks up to me and says, excuse me, these people over by the soundboard, are they supposed to be here? I said, oh, yeah, you don't have to worry about them. They're with Lex. That's cool. and she goes, oh, thank God. Right. And she walks away and I'm going, holy crap, I'm the only person that's not supposed to be here. And they're asking me advice. So then about, 20 minutes later, she walks back, taps me on the shoulder. Now I'm getting cocky. I turn around and I go, yes. Excuse me, I'm working here. And meanwhile, I got to realize I've got a camera on my lap and I'm recording my friend rehearsing Mull of Kintyre with Paul. And she says, are cameras allowed at the show tonight? I said, absolutely not. Oh, thank God you're here. And she walks away. Like these people thought that I was part of the show somehow. And wow. I just happened to be there. I wasn't supposed to be there at all. Anyway, so I did get to go backstage as Paul entered. He was with Heather at the time. Right. And he enters, and I happen to be at the very front of the lineup of people. And he looked at me, he goes, hey, lay low, mate, lay low, right? Like just typical McCartney, making everybody feel at ease type of thing. And it was like, and he was looking right at me. I went, I didn't know, I didn't say nothing. I just feel like a little kid again, right? Yeah. Anyway, it was cool, but you got to interview the man, which is cool. The funny thing is, I was the radio station I worked at is in Miami at the time, and he was rehearsing at the AAA where the Miami Heat play. It's called something else now, and it was like 10 miles away. And he was there for like 2 weeks rehearsing, and he even did a live version of "Please Please Me" for the Grammys from there or something.
And I've been trying to get an interview through his publicist and through this person at the record label. And he calls me up one day, this manager or the publicist, and he goes, "Well, I got your interview with Paul McCartney." I said, "Great." He goes, he said, "It's Saturday night." I said, "Well, he's going to be in Tampa." He says, "Oh yeah, well, you'll have to go to Tampa, which is a 5-hour drive." I said, "Yeah, but he's a half hour from me. Is there any way I could do it while he's in Miami?" He goes, "Oh, you don't want to do the interview?" And I'm going, "No, of course I want to do the interview." He goes, "Well, I can do Miami, but it would be over the phone." He says, "No, you come to Tampa, it'll be you and Paul." So I drove us 5 hours to Tampa. I didn't have a ticket to the show. So I did the interview. And like I said, he said, "Don't do this, don't ask that, don't ask that." But what I thought was interesting is they travel with all their rooms. And so the room, because he doesn't want to sit, I'm thinking he doesn't want to sit on leather or get photographed on a leather couch or something like that. So they travel with all their old furniture and fake palm trees and everything. And also I think it's familiarity. The staff knows where to go, where's the food, they have the same footprint, I think, backstage if they can. So everything was the same. And he came in. And I had this, I should have brought it over here. There's a little mini disc recorder. It's silver, and you pull it out and the little disc slides out, and before, when I stopped carrying DAT players around, I had the mini disc because the quality was pretty good. And so I tested it. I put batteries in it. I must have tried it 15 times. Hello, test 1, 2. I had him. And he comes into the room and we're ready to start. And it wouldn't go into record. And I'm pushing this red button and it's like jammed or something. And so the only person in the room was the publicist, a photographer, and the videographer. I wish I had the video of that, videotaping the whole thing. And I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do? Am I going to pretend to record him? Am I going to just ask the video guy, "Can I have a copy of your sound?" He's going to say no, So I didn't know what to do. And Paul looks at me, he goes, "Oh, your tape recorder's not working, huh?" And I'm thinking, so I go like this with my fist on the side of it, it's like one of these. And I went like that, and it came on. And I said, "I can't freaking believe it." Now I have an iPhone and whatever, I would definitely have at least 2 versions of something to record on. But I got to record it. But God, I was so scared because I drove all that way, and I actually parked in the wrong thing. And then I get to the arena. They invited me to the sound check, and I realized I didn't have my recorder. Had to go back to the car. That killed a half hour. So I was really a mess, man. It almost didn't happen. My fault, it was. But he couldn't have been sweeter and kinder. And I got him to do these liners for me that we use in radio. "Hi, this is Paul McCartney." And what I did is I wrote them in the style of the new album. So I knew that if I needed to edit them, I could, in 5 years from now, I could use just, "Hi, this is Paul McCartney, and Joe and I are listening to Beatle Brunch," stuff like that. And right now we're going to play a track from Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. And he would go on and introduce the song. So I have that, but I could also stop it after he does, So that's how I do I learned to do with artists, all the liners, so that you don't just have to use it for that one event,
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely.
But it's a lot different. Ringo is a lot more, I've interviewed him a bunch of times. He's really rushed, and it's easy to get him off topic, and you don't get what you need because you have 9 minutes, because you're in a series of interviews, and they go, "Oh, you're going to have 10 minutes. But by the time you get on and he's off mic and, you're blabbering and stuff, you're lucky if you get 8.5 minutes. So he was talking, he just wouldn't stop talking about how much he loved EPs as a kid. And I think, well, that's not really helping me for Beatle Brunch. I needed to talk about his song and this and the anthology. Or they were working on the Peter Jackson thing. It was almost ready to come out. I wanted to know if he'd seen it. So yeah, he's a little more in his own thing, whereas Paul just kind of sits back and waits for you to ask, and then he answers. And well, Joe, it was both were great though. They were pretty.
Yeah, it's still just an honor to be there. I remember hearing a story when Randy was on tour with Ringo. I guess. It was
the All-Star Band.
Yeah,
for sure.
And it was his birthday, and so they did a remake. Like they sang a remake of "Bingo Was His Name-O," but under Ringo. And,
cool.
Ringo had never heard that song before. It must be an American or a North American song because he'd never heard it.
It's like a song you sing at camp or something like that in America,
Yeah. So, and he had never heard it. So he thought they wrote the song.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. It's interesting. Just the whole thing about the Beatles and how you found your niche like that. Like, so where do you think you really became a Beatles fan? You said when you were like 6, 7, 8, it was sort of nebulous. It was like
it
just
was around.
more stuff on the radio.
I have two older sisters, so they bought some stuff, but I remember looking through their records. They had like Born to Be Wild, and they had different stuff. They had Bobby Sherman. They were into Partridge Family. You know, they were not as much into the Beatles, but I remember listening to. I have a copy of the White Album on white vinyl, so it's not the original. But I was with the girlfriend at the time. We were in one of the bedrooms at my parents' house, and we were playing the clues backwards. You know, number 9, turn me on, Deadman, turn me on, Deadman. And I was telling her about all these clues. This was a Saturday night, and it was the next 2 days later that John Lennon was assassinated. It happened to be that particular night, like 2 nights earlier. We were listening to all these Paul is Dead clues. It was just really weird.
Yeah, very surreal.
At around that time, I guess I got into the Beatles, I guess around mid 70s, probably. They had already broken up. I remember not really understanding, and I still don't really understand fully, the dynamic with John and Yoko. All I can appreciate that, you know, he could have had anyone he wanted. So he really wanted to have someone he wanted, not that it was just gorgeous or whatever. But being kind of mad at him in the early 70s, because I couldn't listen to Two Virgins and I couldn't listen to those albums. And you know, I felt like, you know, I want to hear hits, you know, I was like 12 years old. I mean, I want to hear, you know, woman is the N word of the world or whatever, you know, those songs. But, you know, McCartney, right out of the box, you know, basically by 72, he's doing Wings and they're on tour. There's so many versions. Like you said, there's the Cavern Club or the pre-Beatles with the toilet seat. Then you got the Beatles, Ed Sullivan kind of period, the 2-minute pop song. And then you get into Revolver and Rubber Soul. They're doing like Dylan-esque stuff, you know, where they're lifting from Dylan. And they actually sing that line from the Elvis song, Run for Your Life. I'd
rather see you dead, little girl, than to be with another man.
Yeah, that kind of thing that Lennon was doing all the time. He was, we lifted that. We stole that.
Talking about that, sorry about to interrupt, but talk about lifts. We were talking about, have you heard Sun King and Albatross? Albatross by Fleetwood Mac?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact,
oh my God.
In fact, in '69, there's an interview I have with John Lennon where somebody stopped him, one of the guys from the BBC, and he went through every track on Abbey Road. So I've got him talking about every track. And when he talks about that one, he goes something about Fleetwood Mac. He says it. It's like, I'd never heard of Fleetwood Mac in '69. And he said, you know, Fleetwood, he mentions Fleetwood Mac. So yeah, they were definitely getting into the Beatles too there at that point.
Oh, Albatross was first, and Sun King is a direct rip of Albatross.
I'm gonna have to AB him on YouTube as soon as
check it out. It's astonishing, actually. It's like it'll make you go, wow.
Yeah,
like it's much more of a rip than My Sweet Lord was. Or close to it, at least as much of a rip.
I'm gonna track that down. I might have that album somewhere because I'm a Fleetwood Mac fan too, but because I played all those on the radio too. So I'm gonna check that out. What was it? There's another song that they do it's a different artist. I've always told people, and nobody ever agrees with me. Maybe you'll do it because you're a musician. I fought the law, but the law won. Bobby Fuller 4. I fought the law and the law won. John Cougar Mellencamp does the Authority song. I fought authority always wins. Yeah. I mean, they're different, but it's got to be influenced by that song.
Absolutely.
It has
no two ways about it. No two ways about it. Yeah.
I mean, it's just I can't say law. What can I say? Authority. Yeah, that's what I'll say. Yeah. You know, which is a weird word. Went to authority. It's like 3 syllables or 4 syllables.
And even the title is called the Authority song.
Yeah.
Odd title, but it was a big hit.
It was a big hit, yeah. So there are similarities in other groups too, and I've often heard interviews with the Beatles where they say, we stole from the best of them, you know. So and there was something that John, I was talking to my wife about this yesterday when we were talking about Sexy Sadie. I said, well, John was singing Maharishi, and George says, you can't do that. You're gonna hurt his feelings. We might get sued. So he changed Maharishi, what have you done? You made a fool of everyone.
Yeah. I still love that song, by the way. I was just listening to it. You know what? I was listening to, actually, I wasn't even listening to the White Album. I was listening to the Analogs doing the White Album live.
Okay. I've never heard them.
Oh, really? Oh, go on YouTube. Look up the Analogs, they're called, and they'll take a Beatles album and they actually recreate it with as many players as it takes. Like they bring on the string players, they bring on like the little recorder parts in Glass Onion
or Fool on the Hill or whatever.
Ba, 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 listen to me. There's two people walk out on the stage with two recorders, and they play a recorder part and they walk off the stage because there's only one recorder part in that song in Glass Onion. But they do everything.
Right. It's that's where they go. He does a reflection back to the Fool on the Hill. You're right, with the recorder. Yeah. That's so funny. That there's a franchise called Classic Albums Live, and they used to come here and play, and they do the same thing. I went and saw them do Let It Be and Abbey Road, and I think they jam after that because the albums are only 40 minutes, so they usually jam afterward. But they're pretty good too. They're very good. And then if you've ever heard the Fab Four, Will Lee and and those guys, and
have you seen Classical Mystery Tour?
No, it was here. I didn't see it. It's like it's the whole orchestra, right? Like the orchestra.
Yeah, I don't think they travel with the orchestra. They probably use. I'm assuming
they probably use local
people with just pivotal stuff, like maybe the first violin they'd keep or whatever. But it's interesting. What I found most interesting, and I think this guy's gone off on his own. I can't remember his name, which is driving me crazy right now. But he is the best McCartney I've ever seen and heard in my life.
Wow.
He looks, the way he walks, the way his legs sit under.
He's in the Classical History Tour, right? Is that what
he was in that, but I think
because I used to see him. I remember they did play an event in Delray Beach, and I was there.
Yeah.
I don't know if I stayed for the whole show because I had been there all day, but I talked to him before the show. You're right. He looks just like Paul. He acts just like Paul.
I know. He's unbelievable. I've never seen anybody that close. And I was like four rows down right from the stage. It was like
there is a guy that looks like Ringo that we used to go to Beatle Fest, and he would go around with all that, taking pictures with people and that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. I've never done, and I've never gone to Liverpool, and that's one of the things I've got to do in my life. I mean, I was supposed to go a few years back with my friend Michael Sicoli that I mentioned earlier, and he ended up going on his own, and because I had to go on tour with Randy or something came up where I just couldn't go. But my wife is now thinking that we might want to go to England. I've been to England a number of times. She had no real desire to go until her daughter went to England. Now she wants to go. And I said, well, we can go to England, but at least 2 days in Liverpool for me. So,
I've done that trip a lot. And if you can do time in London, you might be able to get a musician's tour of Abbey Road Studios. That might blow your mind, if you're in London.
I actually had that lined up. I actually had, at one point, I was actually close to lining up doing some recording there with my band, just to say we did it. Just to
say you did it, yeah. And then there's a train that goes from London to Liverpool. It only makes like one stop. You get there in 3 hours. It's real comfortable. You have food on and everything. So you could easily do that. It takes you right to the Adelphi Hotel, which is the heartbeat of So I've taken it many times, and usually I'm on a trip and I just bring my luggage and I go to Liverpool, and then I fly home from Manchester or something. Oh. But I haven't been there since they really embrace their Beatledom. So there's statues everywhere. I don't know if you saw James Corden when he did Carpool Karaoke with McCartney.
Right.
And they were driving all through Liverpool and Paul's old home, and you see all the people following them and taking pictures and everything. And McCartney, it was interesting to see him go into his family home and him say, I haven't been here since I moved out when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And you would think that before they opened it to the National Trust that he would want to see and stuff like that. So he was there, and he was actually playing on that. You probably saw it. He was playing on the piano. It's not the actual piano that his father owned, but he was talking about, this is where we wrote She Loves You. And we practiced it. We practiced it in the bathroom because we had echo and everything in there and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. He tells the story of his dad saying, why are you saying yeah, yeah, yeah? Why don't you say yes, yes, yes?
Yeah,
Love
there's
it.
too much Americanism in the songs. Yes, yes, yes.
So that was a great carpool karaoke. I really enjoyed seeing those places. But the point is that Liverpool has got so much Beatles stuff. And the time I was there, they have one of the Magical Mystery Tour buses. Maybe there were 4 of them or 7 of them. And they've kept this one and they use it for tours. So it's kind of nice because you're in one of the buses that has Magical Mystery Tour on the side. But the whole thing is only like 2.5 hours. It's good. You see like the highlights, but I took one, there's like a white panel van and there were like seats for like 6 or 8. And it was the whole day. It was 8:30 to like 5:30. And you really got to be a hardcore, but it's so good. You go to the Liverpool Oratoria, you go up to the that big church that you always see. They take you everywhere. They take you to all the homes. I think it was when I went, it was before you could go in the homes. So you can actually, I think you can go in John Lennon's house and Paul McCartney's house. I've been inside Ringo's and it's just like it's like a 2-story and it's really narrow. And you could, I mean, probably this bedroom is probably the whole size of the room. But there was a lady that owned it and people were knocking on the door and she would let you come in and look around. You know, Ringo lived here for a couple of years, I guess.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah, I would definitely recommend Liverpool, and they've really Beatleized it. You know, there's the Hard Day's Night Hotel, which my friend Shannon, the artist, did all of the paintings for. There's a John Lennon room, there's a McCartney room, and she paints these gigantic, you know, airbrush. Her paintings look like photographs. They're that stunning. Shannon is her name. You can look her up on social media. Yeah. So I would stay at I like to be comfortable. So I'd stay at the Hard Day's Night Hotel or something.
Yeah. Is it nice?
Yeah. It's practically brand new. It's only been open for like a year or 2. Yeah.
When Michael went to Liverpool, he ended up going with a guy that refers to himself as a walrus because he's got the big mustache and all that stuff.
Okay.
But his claim to fame is his brother was, his brother was, what the heck is his name? The one that he was in A Hard Day's Night with the Beatles. His brother, he was the main actor, like the manager guy, the stage guy.
You got the guy. Well, there's the traditional actor Victor Spinetti that played the director, but then there's the guy that was like their minder. Mm-hmm. Come on, boys, you got to get to rehearsal. You know, there's that.
Yeah,
guy.
and I think that might have been his brother.
Okay.
Yeah. And so anyway, but he does a whole tour like this, and it was one of those more personal things. So he was with him you know, taking him around. And
we had this woman who was doing this tour for years, and she was an expert. And in our group was Louise Harrison, and you know, to have her there was pretty good. But you know, when the woman's trying to give the tour and Louise kept interrupting, that's not true. My brother never went, you know, like that. And I think she was getting kind of annoyed. At one point she said, would you like to give the tour? You know, and I think Louise stopped doing that.
Well, it's so hard because you got a rhythm, as you know. You get a rhythm going, and it's like somebody interrupts your rhythm, and now you got to rethink everything you're saying, and it throws you off, you know.
When I used to do stand-up, that would throw me off because I'd have my bits memorized, and I knew there was a word in that bit that reminded me of the next bit, like the word car reminded me getting gas or whatever the next bit was. And if somebody was getting a birthday cake in the club, or they were doing their checks, or somebody hollered out something, it would throw you off, and you'd have to stop and go, hey, is it your birthday? I guess we'll all sing happy birthday to, you know, Mitch or whatever. And then you forget where you are in your act, you know, if you're not I wasn't a seasoned stand-up. I just did like the middle bit for like a couple of years. But so you're right. So what you were saying is if you have your narration and you know what you do next and somebody interrupts you with the story.
You talk about stand-up, even when I'm sitting down and I'm like, I just a little while ago, I did a Simon and Garfunkel show at this, it's a theater that's built into a recording studio in White Rock, BC. It's fantastic. It's called Blue Frog. Amazing place because it's the big room in the studio. Okay. It's almost like when McCartney played at Abbey Road, I suppose, when he did his little concert there.
Right.
People, they bring in 100 chairs, folding chairs, and you do a concert there. Anyway, I was playing there, and I was talking about a song, and there was a guy right in the very front row who's a friend of mine, and he said something, and it threw me off totally. I forgot totally what I was saying. I was lost. So like, it seems like an eternity. I probably skipped a beat for about 3 seconds. To me, it felt like forever, but yeah, it's amazing how fast you can get thrown off your game though. And I've always said, I think comedians that's got to be one of the hardest jobs in the world. I have so much respect for comedians.
Yeah. Well, there's this George Carlin thing coming to HBO in about 2 weeks. I can't wait to watch it because I was a huge fan of him.
Oh.
Even they play clips of him now on social media where he's like talking about whatever the issues are, abortion, whatever. And he's like right on target from like 30 years ago.
I know.
He was so incredible.
He was not a comedian. He was a prophet.
He was a speaker of things, and the way he put words together. And the last time I saw him, it was an HBO thing. He had like an extra stool, and you could see he had his papers there, and he would, he was still working out his act, or he didn't have it fully memorized, like which piece goes where and stuff. But God, he was so incredible. I saw him once down here in South Florida, and I think I was in the very last row. Behind me was like a wall. But it was worth it. And I remember you couldn't hear him at the beginning, and they're going, louder, louder. And he goes, I don't know why the Louder family comes every time you do a show and they yell out their name.
I remember seeing him one time on Johnny Carson, and it was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. He went on, they announced him, and he walked out, and he did not say a word for 3 minutes. Not one word. He sat there and he just looked around. And people were killing themselves laughing because it was an uneasy laugh, but then they were laughing, and he just look at his watch. And knowing him, somebody probably said something like, "You can't do that bit." He says, "Well, I'm either doing that bit or I'm not doing it at all." And so if they said that, he probably just walked in. Okay, I'm not doing it at all. That's
probably what happened.
He was that defiant. He would just stand out there for 3 minutes and not say a word. Wow. But it still worked because it was him.
Who was the guy that Andy? Who was the guy from Taxi that did all that?
Oh, weird? Yeah.
And he would actually take everybody on a bus to like a restaurant or something like that.
Yeah. Terrible. I remember seeing him on Evening at the Improv one time when he actually started. He had his cancer was starting to happen, and he was doing his bit on, and he had people from the audience walking up and touching his tumor on his neck.
Wow.
And then he invited them all out onto the street, and they went out to a diner. Everybody from the Improv, and the cameras followed them. It was Andy Kaufman. Yeah.
Andy Kaufman. Sure. Yeah.
Like what a strange, like there's a guy that's just living his art,
Yeah.
He just is. His life is his art. It's like a much more intense way, like John Lennon lived his art, but Andy Kaufman is even more so.
I mean, the super sad thing about John Lennon is if you look at those last, like from the time Sean was born to the end, he was really becoming kinder and more reflective about the Beatles. He gave an interview with Playboy magazine that became a book, and where they sat down and they just spread out albums and they talked about like every song. And Westwood One owns that tape, and I used to work for Westwood One, my show. I could never get them to give me that. They said, no, Yoko will not allow us to make a copy of it. It was the Playboy interview with David Sheff in September of 1980. And I mean, literally every song of all of the songs. Oh, that's Paul could write a good song if he's a good boy, stuff like that.
Yeah.
He had some great comments, or he would go, yesterday, wonderful song. Never wished I wrote it. Wonderful, beautiful song. He was really honest,
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, no, I remember I had those two Playboy. It's the only time I think I was allowed to buy a Playboy magazine was for those articles, because it was part 1 and part 2. And then I ended up buying the book a year later.
Right. Yeah. It's funny too, because sometimes I'll hear an interview and then I'll read it in the book and I go, they kind of retyped the question. I mean, I guess you have to do that. And sometimes, because like, I remember the question, the spirit of the question is correct, but the wording of it is different. Maybe the interviewer didn't want to seem like he was asking the question, grammatically incorrect or something. I don't know. I guess it doesn't really matter. It does. That's like you and me, like the picking out the minutia of the songs, and all the. I remember sometimes I would go to a festival and, oh, you do Beatle Brunch. Yeah. What do you like about the show? Thinking they're going to go, I like when you crossfade this into that and you talk about the birds and then you bring in the Hills of Rhymney or whatever, and then you play the George Harrison song. and they go, "Oh, I love the music." You know, they don't really get very specific. The average fan, I mean, but that and I interviewed Randy Bachman when this album came out, and I forget where studio he was in L.A. and they were cool enough to send me like the mic feed at the end of the interview, so I had me on mic here and him on mic there, and I remember because I was a huge Guess Who and Bachman Turner Overdrive. I might even still have the 8-track Bachman Turner Overdrive.
Sorry, that's my dog Jenny.
Jet, right? Jet.
Jenny.
Oh, Jenny. Okay.
Jenny. Yeah.
Anyway, I remember asking him, you know, specific, really deep, specific questions about some of the Bachman Turner Overdrive songs, like "You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet" with the stuttering. And I said, I'd read that was something for your brother, that he had a stutter, and you wrote that song. And he told me the whole story. It was that he did it as a joke for his brother, and he sent him this cassette tape and that kind of thing. You probably know the story better than me. Right. But we did this interview for like 45 minutes, and he had this like incredible recall of every detail, and so perfect. And I said that to him at the end. I said, "Randy, how do you have your memory is insane. It's so perfect." And I don't know if this is true because you spend private time with him. He goes, "Joe, I've never had a drug. I've never smoked a joint. I've never taken any, I've never had a drink. I don't drink coffee." That's
true.
And that's why his memory is spot on.
Well, he told me that the last time he had a drink was at the very, very, very beginning of the Guess Who. He was at a party one time, and I remember somehow it was snowy out in Winnipeg, and he had to move a car, and he had been drinking.
Oh yeah.
And he had to move the car, and somehow, because the car was stuck, he had his foot outside the car, and he was pushing like this.
Oh yeah, trying to push it back. Yeah.
Somehow ran over his own foot. He didn't hurt himself, but because it was still, there was snow.
It was wet and snowy.
His father came out, and his father was definitely the grand patriarch of the family. Everybody like held his, he held his dad the highest level, and his dad walked out and said, "I'm so ashamed of you."
Wow.
And that was it. He never had another drink. And then, of course, later on, he met a Mormon girl, and of course, there was no drinking or coffee or anything like that allowed in that religion. So that just became part of his lifestyle. But he was already living that way anyway. So
yeah. And when we do these cruises, we do the Q&A thing. And when we had Gary Peterson from the Guess Who, the interesting thing about the new Guess Who, and I know that it's probably not Randy's favorite thing, is they admit that they're not the originals. And so when they're on stage, they go, "We love to play these great songs as much as you'd love to hear them. We didn't write them, we're, whatever." Mm-hmm. So they come clean. But Gary was telling some stories about Burton Cummings, and with running back and forth in the car and not missing, they're on stage and he's not there. And, I think that's what people like hearing, those crazy, nutty behind the scenes things,
Yeah, no kidding. I had the opportunity to work with Gary, actually. That's why actually when I met Randy, the first time I met Randy was 98. And it was because I was asked to play on an album. And Gary Peterson was the drummer as well. So it was kind of a cool thing for me. And Donnie McDougall, who was in the Guess Who after Randy left. So there was 3 Guess Who alumni along with me. So it was a fun album to work on for cool. Sure. But that's when Randy asked me to join his band. I couldn't at the time because it would have meant putting my own band out of work. And so I didn't think I'd ever get the call again. But eventually, a couple of years later, I was, he kept me in mind, and I joined the band. I've been there ever since. So it's been, 22 years, I think, something like that.
That this is one of those stories that's kind of off the record, but when Ringo had his all-star band, he would also record on albums, and he would have Ringo and the Roundheads. So that was Mark Hudson and the guys that are on the recordings all the time. And Mark Hudson had been bugging Ringo, "I want to be in the all-star band." The Hudson brothers had, 2 hits and that kind of thing, and bugged him for years. And finally, he agreed that Mark could be in the all-star band. And they printed up the posters and stuff, Mark Hudson and who else was there. And I don't remember. And then Mark never did one show. He got the offer to be on this TV show, kind of like an American Idol for bands or something like that. And it lasted 1 episode. So he quit the all-star band for that. And then I don't think him and Ringo have talked in 15 years. I know. It's so sad.
Yeah. So sometimes the choices you make are so hazardous. Oh God. bad.
He said at the time, I can make more money in one episode of this TV show than I make on the whole tour with Ringo. Because I think with Ringo, I'm sure he pays fair, but I think they fly in a Learjet, they stay at the Ritz, they have a nice setup for themselves. I think that he kind of sells it that way.
Yeah. Well, if you've seen the TV shows on Sidemen, the movies
I'd love to see that.
Well, it's on Netflix, and Rudy Sarzo's on it a lot, and just and you see all these people that have been hired as sidemen who you think are actually rock star status, but a lot of them are kind of just making normal lives. It's not rock star money.
Right.
So the stars of the show are the ones that make the money. There's no two ways about it.
The Inagata Davida, who's the band?
Iron Butterfly.
Iron Butterfly. I think it's the keyboardist for Iron Butterfly. He was on one of those Q&As with me, and he tells that story that he was moonlighting as a limo driver, and he was also the organist at the church, and he was playing at a funeral, and he was doing all these things to make money. And I see him on Facebook sometimes, I had don't have any health insurance, and I hurt my foot and whatever, that kind of thing. So I feel for those guys,
I have a line that I've used a few times, and I'm very happy to be a never was than a has been, because I'm still always, and it's not because it's just, I'm still always striving for the thing that I've never really grabbed the brass ring. It's never happened. I mean, I play with Randy and I get notoriety, all that sort of stuff, but that's not the same thing as having that recording contract and my name in the lights and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I get enough of that with my own shows, and I'm happy with that. But I've got a good life. I've got a really good life, and I was able to have a good life playing music. And I think I'm a lucky man.
Quality of life is so much more important than what you do. And when I got into radio in 1978 or 9, there was an opening at our station for mornings. The morning person left. And I remember going to my boss, because I was like a third wheel on the morning show. I did traffic and I made little jokes and stuff like that, but I was certainly green. And I remember going to my boss and general manager and saying hey, can I audition for the morning show principal job, the host? And he said, and we're in Miami, which is market 11. And he says to me, no, you need to go to a small market and work your way back up. And I go, well, I'm already in Miami. I'm not leaving. I'm already working, even though I was making like $15,000 a year or something. But, I just hung in there, just been in here pretty much my whole life. I just didn't want to be moving all the time,
So I guess I got to get back to how you started the whole Beatle Brunch idea and how it grew. How did you make it grow? What, all that stuff? Because I'm sure there's a huge story going on there that we haven't even touched yet.
I guess, I mean, basically, I was going, my family was shooting one of those pictures at Sears or whatever, everybody gets together and they shoot those pictures. And because most of them lived south of me, it was like 45-minute drive. So I had to be there. So I grabbed a bunch of Beatle CDs that I have back here and took them with me. It's the first car I ever had in 92 that had a CD player. I never had a CD player in a car, never heard of it, or, it never worked. So this had like 6 speakers and sounded great. And I'm listening to these bootlegs and other things, and they sounded so wonderful. And I had this 45-minute drive. And I remember coming into work the next day, and my boss, who was also a big Beatle fan, my program director boss, I said, I can't believe nobody's doing a Beatles show in this radio market. It's a big market. And I said, I'd like to do one. He goes, well, put something together. So he kind of threw it back at me. So that weekend I went into their studio and I kind of put together, it was going to be the anniversary of Sgt. Pepper, the 25th. So I put together a show based on that, and I played it for him, and he liked it. And then he says, we're going to start it. We're going to start it on the 31st, which is the 25th anniversary of Pepper. So we started it at the one station in Miami on reel to reel. And our company happened to own 4 other stations that were oldies too. So after a couple of weeks, he was the program director of all of them. He said to them, you're going to be carrying the show Beatle Brunch. So all of a sudden it was on 5 stations, but I had to make reel-to-reel tapes, mail them out, usually go to the post office, and they weigh like 2 pounds. And I did it that way for a while. And then when CDs came along, And DATs, they were, I think I was up to like 12 or 15 markets. One at a time, I would make calls to program directors. There was no internet, so I had to FedEx them like a cassette or a CD of the show or a demo that I put together. I couldn't email them. There wasn't even any email. And I used to realize that the only time you could get these guys on the phone, because they'd never take your call, there was always somebody to block a program director, is if you call it like 20 after 8 in the morning when there's no switchboard, then they answer the phone. That's the only time you can. So I realized the only way I could ever get these program directors is to call them super early when their guard was down. And then, so we would do that, and I would send them, and one by one, I built up a couple stations. And then I remember I had 39 stations. And
but for you to get from where you are in Miami up to where I was listening to it in Vancouver Island.
Right.
That's pretty remarkable.
And I don't know how we got Vancouver. Because I had a guy that was helping me and with getting the stations. But when we started to get more stations, I bought I don't even think they make them anymore. I can just do it. It was a 4 CD stacker that you could put the CD in and make 3 copies. And then once you've done it, then you can make 4 copies, and they would only take a fourth of the time. So it would take about 15 minutes or less to burn 4 shows. And at the time I had 39. So it'd take whatever, like 2 hours or 3 hours. And I paid a guy like $50 to burn all these shows for me and make all the labels and make all the cue sheets. I would type it on a regular typewriter in the studio, go into the office, make, 12, 15, 39 copies or whatever, cut them up in little pieces, put them in the CD and mail them out. And that's how it started. And then I met with a syndicator at United Stations, and they were going to take the show from me, but he said to me, well, Dick Clark is a partner in our company, so you might not be hosting the show. So I didn't want to hear that. I'm going to be producing it for Dick Clark. I thought, I don't really want to do that. So I knew a guy that listened to the show in Nashville. He was the vice president of programming for Westwood One. And so he knew of the show. And I reached out to him, and he said, yeah, I know the show very well. So he said, well, they said they would do a deal with me and take the show on. So what it turned out to be is I only had to send 1 CD to the syndicator like Saturday afternoon for 2 weeks away. And then they would take it, they would burn all the CDs, and they would send them out to all the stations. And then because that's what they do, marketing, before long, they had me up to like 120 stations, which was great. And it was easier for me because I only had to do 1 show. It had to be a specific length and everything, and I didn't have Pro Tools. It was still analog.
And how long from there to 120 stations? Well, how long from inception?
So I got my syndication deal in 2000, and I started in 92. So for 8 years, it was me just slugging it out on Friday night, going into.
I was listening to you on the radio. You were sending those tapes to Sia.
Yeah, exactly. And it was Canada, so it was a different price structure. It wasn't bad. I mean, today it would be like $30 or something like that, but it was like $2 or whatever. And so I was sending them probably CDs by the time 2000 came along, and then Westwood One had me from 2000 to like 2018 or 19, which is pretty good, and they paid really well. And then they decided they weren't going to do any more music shows. They just wanted sports programming, and they do like NBA playoffs and things like that. So they cut my show, and they put me with this other syndicator, which I'm still with, but the pay is way less, but that's okay. Cause I do it here at home, and, I do it on, I can upload the show obviously on an FTP. I finish it up. Like I finished the show that's going to air on the 15th. And, if you are familiar with the new Let It Be box, there's the Glyn Johns mix. Do you know of that?
Yes.
Yeah. So I decided to do, because it's the anniversary of the premiere of the film in New York on the particular week that I'm doing the show. I think it was going to be like the 17th of May, but my show's on the 15th. So I decided I'm going to do Let It Be Glyn. That's what I call it. So I'm just playing those 14 songs from that CD. I can't play them all because I have to be done at 48 minutes. So I picked out, like 9 of them or whatever. And I have little stories. I went on YouTube and I found interviews with him that I can either listen to or lift little sections of him talking about working with the Beatles kind of thing. So I'm not sure what your question was, but that's how it works. That's how it works now for me.
And so so for you to get paid, let's say back in the day, you're mailing off these these tapes to, let's say, Sea Isle in Richmond, BC, which
right, that's right, Richmond, British Columbia.
Yeah, but they paid a licensing fee to you for that.
Well, what they do, no, see, it's a different situation. Well, first of all, I had two sponsors that I got myself. I had a friend of mine that got Beatle. They used to be called Beatle Fest, the Fest for Beatles fans. They were paying, oh my gosh, they were paying like hardly nothing to be heard in 100 markets or whatever. They were paying like, I don't know, 200, maybe 200 a week or 150 a week. And then I had this other company called The Music Machine. They sold rarities and things that you and I would like. And they were paying like $500 a month or whatever their deal was. So that paid for my materials. I didn't make any money. That got me by, and that kind of thing. And I did production and other stuff, and I had a full-time radio job. So, when I got the deal with Westwood One, then I was able to, I couldn't run the spots for the clients that I had, but I had them put it into the contract that I could mention them at the open and close. Brought to you by Fest for Beatles fans, this week featuring, McDonalds. So that's how I did. I was able to get some extra money with sponsorships, but just to keep them on, really, because they had been loyal to me,
Wow.
So, yeah.
It's amazing because are you, well, you would still make money from them broadcasting, would you not?
Oh, no, that's what I started to say. No, the way it works is I deliver, they happen to have this product, and if they choose to play it, they're responsible for the licensing. So all radio stations pay, it's not SAG and after it's BMI and ASCAP,
right.
Royalties. And then
so can up here, yeah.
Okay, so they pay all that. So they pay it for all the music they play. So
right.
I do give them a cue sheet, and at the end of whatever time period that they're monitored, that they have to put down what they played and who the writer of it was. That when they have to do probably 4 Beatle Brunch programs in between. Most of the time, the writer's Lennon McCartney, but it could be Isley Brothers, whatever, Twist and Shout. So they're responsible for that, and I think there's a DMCA law too about streaming certain things, certain songs that are written by or owned by record labels. I'm not really super clear on it, but there are stations that run the show on their radio, and then they just block that hour that they can't play the show on the internet because they have to abide by the DMCA laws.
What I'm really trying to nail down is not necessarily those licensing things. It's how you're getting paid. Are you getting paid by these radio stations?
No, the stations. What happens is the show goes to them. I give them a 48-minute show. They put the Compass Media, the distributor, they put in 6 minutes of their commercials. So it's a bunch of 30-second spots. So it's 12 30-second spots, and it's like Progressive Insurance, DoorDash. They have insurance companies, hardware stores, national chains kind of a thing, internet companies. And so they are the ones that get paid for inserting the advertising in the show. They send it, upload it, I upload it to the station. The commercials are put in, it goes out to the stations. They play it. They have 6 minutes left over that they can put, Sea Isle can put their own spots in.
Right.
Or promos or play more music if they don't have spots or whatever. So that's how that works. So I don't get paid at all from the stations. I get paid from the syndicator.
Okay.
So,
okay.
And it's like a percentage, depending. So I just added a couple of new markets in Monterey, and one of them is going to get into San Francisco. So that would be good. If I have more listenership, it'll pay more,
So how many, are you in more markets now than you were, or less markets now since everything?
Well, it's funny. They sent me a list last week, and it's got 200 markets on it. But if I dissect them carefully, I can see, well, one of them is using a TV signal. One of them is online. One of them is a translator, and they'll put the city as New York, but it's really like a city, and it's out in the country. So it's not New York City, the number 2 market in the country, or maybe number 1. So the last I saw was literally like a week ago, 200 markets. And then I just added 3 this week. So like a little over 200. But also looking on there, I can tell a few that have dropped off. I know there's so the list would have to really be worked over, but it's probably, in honest, probably 175 or something like that. I mean, there's a few that I should pull off of there, but it's pretty good because I don't have to do any of that. I used to have to do all the affiliate relations, ad sales, production, distributing.
It's an exhausting amount of work.
The first 8 years were like slugging it out, for real. And I didn't make any money. Like I said, I had 2 sponsors, so maybe it was $200 a week for both. And that paid for buying DAT tapes, buying, if I wanted to go to Beatle Fest, I'd buy a plane ticket or something like that. So yeah, there was no money in it. But I sold montages too. I do production. So I would do these themed montages that weren't necessarily Beatles. They were like about waking up in the morning. So you'd use It's a Beautiful Morning, Wake Up, Little Susie, you'd all these little wake up things, string them together and do a promo. So that was the imaging that I did for the station. So I was doing all these real creative promos, songs about rain, songs about heat, songs about sunshine, not even the song, just a line from the song. And I'm
trying to picture what that would be.
I'll send you one. It would be like, what would it be like? Do I have Pro Tools up? Hang on a second.
There's probably no way to play it on this show, but
yeah, there is. I can play it. Well, it'll play through the speaker.
Well, and if it doesn't sound that good, if you send it to me, we'll embed it into the show.
Yeah, you can do that. So let me open up.
Beautiful morning. Oh, ain't that beautiful? It's all too beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. It's all too beautiful. Beautiful day.
That's great.
So you get the idea. So
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So it's anything you can create, and that's the production I started doing. I kind of branded myself as that because our radio station. We had a huge competitor we were trying to get off of oldies. We changed format and hired all these people and bought advertising and we had a competitor that had been in the market a long time called Waxy 106, and we wanted to blow their doors off. So instead of playing, like if I listen to production on the radio now, I'm a really tough critic because it's not very creative. It's phasers and zappers and EQ'd. You're listening to Q99, So I said, well, I'm not going to do that. That's not entertaining. That's a tune out. I said, what if our format continued into the break and it was entertaining? What if the messages were just as fun to listen to as the songs? Right. Instead of, playing a screaming commercial or something. So I started doing these, and I would do them with, our station was called Magic. So maybe the first one I did was Magic. It would go, oh, ho, ho, it's magic. And there would be like 10 Magic songs in a row. Sometimes I would theme something and the announcer doesn't come on till the end. So the listener's trying to figure out what you're doing. So I did hundreds of those.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. And what I started doing is I had a friend that I said to my business partner, why don't we sell these? Because every oldie station would love to have these montages. I'll give them a script. I'll give them on a DAT, all these montages with a listing of what they are. And they have to go, oh, it's always a beautiful day when you tune into CIL 650 or whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's up to the station. So we started selling these montages for like $600 for like a DAT. So I kind of was making money that way. Then a guy reached out to me from ABC Radio. They were starting a service called Goldmine. And Goldmine was all this stuff flashing back. So if this was the week of May 15th, I would have a Let It Be piece on there. There might be some kind of listener talking, anything an oldie station could use to image themselves. And it would be people talking or, oh, I love the oldies here, that without saying the station, they would just be generic. Oh, I love when you guys play the oldies. I love waking up in the morning with you, whatever, they would put those into little promos. So I was collecting, and I was doing that anyway for my station. So I was able to use the stuff I was already doing and mix it out, take my voice off it with the station voice and send it to this ABC Radio Today.
That's excellent.
And I did like hundreds of those. I mean, I've got them. Some of them I don't even have because I did them in their Pro Tools, and I don't even know if I didn't save them. I saved a lot of them. And then I did a bunch of tribute songs. Like for 9/11, I did a tribute piece that got played nationwide. We had a hurricane down here, Hurricane Andrew, which is coming up on its 30th anniversary. Since we're Miami, we were all over this hurricane, and we owned it. I mean, we didn't play music for like a week, and we were covering who's bringing ice and how to get water, and this guy needs roofing tiles and all that stuff. We were like a news station. So I took all these clips from the news and the weather and the guy at the National Hurricane Center and the reporter and people on the street, and I put them all down, and I started laying them over songs, and whatever song about weather and rain and stuff. And I used Riders on the Storm and I didn't have to change songs. It was perfect. And I did it on an analog 8-track, and it's like,
Yeah.
and he goes, the forecast for South Florida, Hurricane Andrew looks like it's going to be a direct hit to Miami. And then you hear, it's coming, you know, and you hear, riders on the storm. We just sat here, my brother and I, we hunkered down, riders on the storm. We were looking for water. Within this town we're born, you know, right?
Wow.
And then I rearranged the verses so that they paid off what they were saying. They didn't have to be in the way Jim Morrison sang them. He goes, there's one line where he goes, gotta love your man, you know, that song. And I dropped in and I went back to the instrumental because it's like a 3-minute instrumental break in that song. And he goes, gotta love your man. The guy goes, yesterday there was a guy that was bringing water to people, and he was dropping off stuff and picking up deliveries, and he was an angel, you know, that kind of thing. So I did this whole thing about Hurricane Andrew.
Wow, that's brilliant.
And I did one after 9/11 too, and that got played nationwide. Well, I sent it to ABC Radio, but also it got picked up, you know. So it was the same kind of thing. It was I didn't want to put really painful stuff in there, but it was like, you know, at about 8:46 in the morning we saw this happen, you know. But it wasn't really. I didn't put explosions. I didn't want to hurt it, you know. It's too tender, you know.
Yeah.
I put different songs. I could send you that too. That in the end, it was like Neil Diamond's America and stuff like that. You know, it's like, and then part of that's playing, and you hear George Bush saying, you know, we're gonna win this, and we're gonna take everything back, and blah blah blah. You know, so it was very powerful. So I've made a lot of those. After Katrina, I did one using "Lean on Me," and the song didn't have enough of an instrumental, but I found a karaoke version that was in the same key, and I crossfaded them back and forth. I'm not even sure if I had digital at that time. I probably had Pro Tools, because it's way much faster in Pro Tools than trying to do it on an analog. So yeah, I did that. I did a lot of those pieces just because I was inspired. I couldn't do them that day. It's like I had to drive around and think about it, and, you know, and hear a song, and that was healing.
Well, that's great. Well, I thank you so much for your time, man. It's been great getting to know you better. I mean, I talked to you longer here than I did on the boat.
Yeah, I hope that you guys are on next year, and I hope that we have some time to hang out.
Well, it's in my calendar, so you know, cross fingers.
Well, I'll send you an email if you want to send me, which I'll fill out the form for the Beatle Brunch Club, and then I'll send it to you on how to get into it.
Love to.
And then you can just, in fact, all the shows are there. So you can go back and listen to the last like 4 years of Beatle Brunches.
Yeah.
And then I have what I call Old Brown shows based on the song Old Brown Shoe.
Right.
And those are the really old ones from like 1992, 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, where I sound totally different because I was still trying to be this like BBC announcer and without the accent. Instead of now, I'm a lot more casual. I go, oh, hey, by the way, did you know Paul's coming out with it? You know, I'm more like I'm talking to you.
Right.
Make the show that way. And the one that I did 2 weeks ago, what was the topic? I can't remember, but that's why I brought up Roger McGuinn, because I did something. Oh, it was songs for women. So since the Beatles used to call women birds, I used Enya Burke and Sing, but I also had an interview with Roger McGuinn of the Byrds saying how he was influenced by the Beatles, and he got that 12-string guitar after a Hard Day's Night and whatever. And he thought that George copied, George even called him and said, I have this song, If I Needed Someone, which I took from the Bells of Rimney, which is a Byrds song.
Right.
I play a little bit of the Bells of Rimney, and then I play the George Harrison song so people can see. You can definitely hear it.
Ah, interesting.
Anyway, that's kind of where I veer off in the show. I try to do, instead of just making it like a history lesson, you know, I try to do things that come to mind that I can move off of, because I do 52 shows a year. So, and
incredible amount of work.
And I do a Sgt. Pepper show every year, but it's always different. And with Pro Tools, I can open up the Pro Tools, and I've got like 10 shows going back in Pro Tools. I do them in the same window, because if I want to borrow a sound bit and move it across, it's easier than.
Well, I'm going to share that click track with you too, so you can hear it, and I'll share the saxophone thing too.
I would love that. That. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
What's happening with this? This is obviously, you can't put 2 hours and 20 minutes on.
Oh no, I will.
Oh, you will? Okay.
Absolutely. What we'll do is we'll have the show in its entirety, and then we'll have it broken down into certain subjects that we talked about. And then we'll also, the picture segment will be something else entirely.
Oh, wow. So, that's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for this. This has been certainly the longest interview I could have that I've ever done, and I'm very honored, man.
Well, there's so much to talk about. We could keep talking, but I can only do 2 hours, and it's already been 2 hours and 10 mintes. So,
well, you know what? Next time I'm going to interview you, and we're going to talk about
that'll be fun. Yeah,
who you played with, and stories and songs you've written, and you'll like I sent you pictures. You'll send me either pictures or audio of things that you want
absolutely.
Me to play.
We'll trade back and forth. We're Beatle brothers.
And if there's I may I'm doing a 30th anniversary show. So I've got like Lawrence Juber did a liner for me. Hal Bruce, who you met on the cruise, a few other people have done liners for me. I'll send you that info if you would record a happy 30th anniversary and identify yourself and say something about you. And then if there's a song, a Beatles song that you would want me to play, either for the anniversary of the show or your specific memory. Hey, Joe, thanks a lot. My first memory is at Sullivan Show or whatever.
Yeah.
I would be honored to have that on there. So that would be
absolutely.
like,
whatever.
So what I'm going to do, that show's just going to be all people saying, requesting and doing stuff about the 30th anniversary of Beatle Brunch.
Oh, that'd be fun. Yeah, it'd be great.
You remember
I'd be honored to do that because I was a big fan of your show way before I met you.
Well, that and we mentioned 650 Sea Isle, so that was in the very early days. That was in the 1994-ish period, probably.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, it was way back. Yeah.
Because I have these. I did one of the ways I got those stations is I did this CD of Beatles montages, like you heard. So I did them for all these different albums, and I made a CD, and we actually sold it to radio stations. And the guy that was helping me sell it, salesperson for that, was talking him into taking the show. Hey, take Beatle Brunch, and so I don't know if they threw the CD in for free with that.
Well, Red is a big Beatles fan too, so he might have had something to do with it because he wasn't the head honcho of the show, but he was definitely the person that they all looked up to because of his his pedigree.
And what happens a lot of times is I'll call a station. Oh, we already have our Beatles legendary guy here. So I'm surprised it didn't happen with the program director of that station saying that we have Red Robinson. How are you going to beat him? I was, I'm not going to beat him. It's just a companion thing.
Well, yeah, but I think there's a certain mystique too of having a show that's coming from a different part of the world too. I thought it was great listening to your show. I didn't know where you were coming from. At the time, I had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, I rarely mentioned South Florida or whatever,
I just knew that I just knew it wasn't being done in Vancouver.
Right. And it's produced, so like everyth's tight now, or tighter, than it was when I was doing it analog. And sometimes the levels will be off and, but it's certainly with Pro Tools, it can be perfect, or the technically perfect, I guess.
Yeah. Anyway, Joe, thank you so much. Great talking to you, man.
Mick, thank you, man. I'm honored that you had me on, and I'm going to email you some stuff about the club and also the liner and
absolutely and
freeform around it. You're not locked into what I write. Just
and we'll include the club things and stuff for people to join your club on the when we broadcast.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, just that blue banner is basically about the club, so that'd be great. Thank you.
Hopefully we can get links that we can put right in there. So
I can send you the link for that. Yeah, that's easy.
Great.
Thank you, my friend.
Cheers, buddy.
Honored. Thank you. You too.
Bye now.